one thing I know about Chris Christie is he's probably happy that this next fellow chose not to run for president of the United States. I'm talking about New Hampshire's very popular governor, Chris Sununu, who opted out of a presidential run, kind enough to join us now. Governor, good to see you.
Good to see you, Neil.
I mentioned Governor Chris Christie, of course, who's placing a lot of his bets, as you know, in your state, less so in Iowa. If you had decided to run, that would have complicated his efforts. Did he send you a thank you note?
No, look, Chris is a great friend. I think he's going to be a great candidate. They're all friends. I mean, all the candidates, is about a dozen folks on stage at this point, getting a little crowded. But they're all friends, and I've talked to them all over the past 24 hours. And again, we're just getting underway. So everyone has a shot, whether it's in New Hampshire and Iowa, to prove their case, retail politics, connect with voters on a very personal level, and ultimately show what they got. Can they give a punch and take a punch on the stage?
You could have made an argument that you would have a good shot at winning your state, but you still opted not to run. Why not?
Well, look, when you look at, where Trump is in the polls, the field is separating. He's separating himself from the field for all the wrong reasons. He does not represent good Republican values. He represents the past. He wants to relitigate the past. And that's not what America is looking for to win in November of 24. He cannot mathematically win in November of 24. So right there, we got to find another candidate and use Iowa, New Hampshire, and some of the earlier states to really see who has the muster, who can deliver on a good presidential run. And my ability, if you will, my skill is hopefully getting more independents, getting more younger voters back onto the team. It has to be a team win. It doesn't have to be the Chris Sununu show. And so, again, I just think that I can be a much more influential and for the benefit of the party and ultimately the nation, kind of doing my own thing on my own time, being a little more, as I said yesterday, a little more unleashed in terms of what I can say and how I can say it.
Your father was instrumental in supporting George H.W. Bush. And he served because of that and helped cement a victory and carry him to the presidential nomination. He became his chief of staff. Do you plan to endorse any of the candidates before New Hampshire?
Yeah, that could happen. That very, very well could happen. Look, if I find a candidate I really like and want to get behind and think can really carry that message to a winning, the winning momentum, not just through the primary, but through 24 and help other candidates, that's exactly who I'm willing to get behind. I couldn't tell you who it is right now. I don't think anybody really could because we're still so early on. But no,
you just said, Governor, you just said that you opted not to run because right now, Donald Trump is so far ahead in the polls. I don't know whether that was one of the reasons you opted not to run, but right now he is very far ahead in the polls. So if he were to win, would you support him, or would you, going right before New Hampshire, say the former president included is among the people I would consider to endorse?
No, I will not endorse former President Trump during the Republican primary process. Look, that guy is all about litigating yesterday. He's not delivering what it's about tomorrow. And I get it. He's playing this victim card. But you don't elect someone president or to be your nominee to play the victim card. If he could win in November of 24, different prospect. But the fact of the matter, Donald Trump wouldn't even win Georgia. And if you're a Republican candidate that can't even win Georgia and would actually cost us other seats, then no, we have to take a hard pass at that, because what it means is if you support Trump and he gets the nomination, Biden ends up the winner. I don't even know if Biden can finish out the second term. So what happens then? We now got Kamala Harris as president? Well, thank you to all the Trump supporters out there. You've just given Kamala Harris as our next president. That's the math.
But you don't know that. You don't know that, right?
Policies
seriously, you don't. I mean, he's up in the polls a lot, and you're quite right. There is a risk that he could, getting the nomination, lose the general election. But I remember back in 2015, 16, around this time, most people thought Jeb Bush would be running away with it. We know what happened. So are you misreading these polls?
No. There's no way Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden in November. That was proven in 2018 when we lost the House. That was proven in 2020 when we lost everything. That was proven in 22 when we should have had 53 or 54 U.S. Senate seats and we lost those. We lost governorships because of President Trump and his message. It doesn't carry. He's a three-time loser going on to carry this party to a fourth-time loss. We cannot have that. Thank you for your service. This is not personal. This is just about winning. We cannot govern. We cannot get this country back unless we have winners up and down the ticket.
Well, what do you
and
do,
he clogs
Governor?
it up. He's about his message, not the Republican
is
message.
the nominee? Who do you vote for? Given a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, if that were the final, what would you do?
Yeah, look, I tell you, if he's the nominee, all my efforts are making sure we don't lose Senate seats again. We don't lose governorships again. Do you know there are folks that lose school board seats because they have to kind of explain away the Donald Trump thing? We need to be about, again, draining the swamp. Didn't happen under him. Limited government. Actual being fiscally disciplined, not adding $8 trillion to the deficit, which he did. Actually getting border security, which we heard a lot about, but he didn't accomplish it. So we have to be about the things that Republicans can be very successful on, and limited government and individual responsibility, not about just litigating yesterday. That's not about the future. America wants somebody that talks with some inspiration and talks about the future, delivers on what they're going to say, and we have a lot of great candidates
effective attack
to do
dog in yourself, and you have a great sense of humor. I mean, right now it's going to be left, I guess, to Chris Christie to be that attack dog, and he's more than happy and willing to do that. The other candidates don't seem quite as inclined to go that route. What do you think?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it is not Chris Christie, the attack dog. I mean, Chris is great, don't get me wrong. But any candidate that's standing on that stage down by 40-plus points in the polls and not attacking former President Trump for his failures and what he has done to this party doesn't deserve to be on that stage. And I mean that really sincerely. This is not a vanity contest to run for vice president. This isn't a chance to get up there and sell books. If you are not passionate about running for president and defeating the guy that's standing ahead of you and defeating the guy that's holding this whole party back, then get off the stage, clear the field. And if I can be a voice in doing that as we hit November, December, with other folks that across this country that I think are going to have that resonating message, either stand up and fight to be the president or stop wasting our time. Because there's too much at stake when it comes to the Republican Party and the opportunity to really get this country back.
So to circle back to what I asked you near the beginning, whether you would endorse a candidate who isn't Donald Trump before the New Hampshire primary.
Yeah, I might. I very well might. I mean, I'll see where it all goes and see who stands out and who connects. My thing is about retail politics, who connects with people on an individual level, not so much on the policy. And if they can do that and get people excited about getting on the team and talk about things that win in November of 24, then that's a candidate I'll be happy to get behind.
All right. So let us know when that happens. But Chris Sununu, it's always good seeing you. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, buddy.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.